Hey everybody, Grandmaster Ben Feingold here with recaps from round 8. We have our longest game of the round, Alireza Firouzja versus Teimour Radjabov. Two players who haven't won any games yet. They're actually fighting for last place right now. Let's see if one of them can get a win. Firouzja's white, e4, e5, as we saw with every game in this round. And we had an Italian. We've seen these Italians before. Now, I'm not going to do a deep analysis of the game because the game went for over 7 hours. So I don't want to do a 7-hour analysis, especially from the players who were in last. But we're going to look at a little bit. It wasn't the most exciting game in the opening, but it got more exciting as the game went on. We've been seeing a lot of A5 in Italians this tournament. Finally, A6 was played instead. So White's like, well, if you're not going to play A5, I'm going to push my queenside pawns. White gets space on the queen side. The players trade pieces. Typical Italian kind of stuff. The players are maneuvering. Rook A2, excellent move, defending the F2 pawn. Now we can play King H2 and get off of this diagonal. Knight F4, King H2, Queen F7, Bishop E3. That bishop's too good. I would seriously consider taking with the F pawn here, but he took with the knight. Oh, also good. And the position basically is about equal. Nobody can really claim an advantage in this position. They've traded all the bishops. Black has a nice knight. Black has the open F file. Black has a lot of center pawns. And you could argue White has a better pawn structure and that White can kick out the knight and eventually advance his kingside or in the center. We shall see. King H8. A lot of maneuvering, not a lot happening, but a lot of maneuvering. Kicks the knight out. Always good to kick the knight out. They're just moving around, trying to find the best squares for their pieces. Put it in H. And at this point in the game, after we play knight takes F6, which we'll get to in a second, we got to see a trade eventually, right? Nothing much is happening. Okay, so D4 is critical, and that's the first critical move of the game that makes it where it's not just moving around randomly and it's going to be a draw. D4 is Firouzja wants to win. Firouzja's got to start winning, as does Radjabov. Okay, he just ignores it and doubles rooks. Rook A2. My phone's excited. Queen C4. Rook B2. And finally, we get to the position I was talking about, knight takes F6. And the reason this is interesting is it looks like you would take either way and it wouldn't matter much. And probably the most likely way is with the rook. Why not keep the open file? Actually, taking with the rook is a blunder. So that's a pretty funny point in the game, that's just sort of a random trade. If you take with the rook, you're actually losing. Now I play H5 attacking the knight. The knight moves away. It doesn't matter where it moves away. I'll move it somewhere. And then we have D takes E5, D takes E5, knight G4 with a winning fork. And White's winning. Not only is White winning because he's winning a pawn, but if we play like a normal move, saving our rook, our queen is trapped. What? So you got to be careful in these quote unquote boring positions. Otherwise, we'll get the boring world of Niels Bohr over here. So instead of rook takes losing, Radjabov took with the G pawn, which is forced. Now they maneuvered around a lot more. They haven't maneuvered enough. It's time to maneuver more. He took with the F pawn. Nothing much is happening. They're just maneuvering around. They traded rooks on the A file. This is the longest game of the tournament so far. In number of moves, I think it's tied. And in number of hours, it wins. This looks like it could be move 30 or move 40, this position. But we're actually on move 50 now. The players are moving around, trying to find something to do. Not much to do. Just move around. There's not a lot of pawn breaks here that make any sense. If they're not going to make a pawn break, nobody's going to win. Luckily, we get a pawn break eventually. Very eventually. Okay, and what White does is he tries to force Black to move his queenside pawns to create weaknesses. So what he does is, after moving around forever doing nothing, that's the first thing he did, is he attacks the pawns on b5. First, he's playing on the king side. Can't take on b5 now because queen takes f3. Can't take on b5 now because queen g3 mate. Can't take on b5 now because queen f3. Now we can take on b5, finally. And he's like, well, I'll just defend it. And he's like, well, I'll just attack it. Finally, white made black make a pawn move, weakening the d6 pawn. Now he's going to come back and attack that. Attacking the d6 pawn. So black's like, all right, I'll play d5. Now the e5 pawn can be attacked. So he tries to attack that. And he's like, no. If you take my e5 pawn, I'll take your f3 pawn. For example, bam. And black's winning. So he says, okay, I won't do that. King g2. King g8. In this position, if we take on h4, now I can take on e5 because you're not attacking f3 anymore. So I would give up my h pawn for your center pawn. And it's still a draw, but white's slightly better. Just slightly. King h8, h5, queen d3, threatening discovered, double, triple, quadruple check. King g7, rook e3, queen f4. And this is my favorite part of the game, mainly because it's almost over, but there's another reason. Watch black's plan in this position. This is not a plan you're going to see every day. King f6. Why did he play king f6? It looks like he just wants to defend his e-pawn some more. Then maybe his rook can go somewhere. King g5. All right, the king's just sitting on g5 looking okay. Now in this position, the king is blocking the battery of the rook and queen. But now after king g5, we're threatening to take on f3. And after rook e1, he keeps going forward with his king. What is he, Nigel Short? King h4. Wow. He just walks his king up. He does this song about the sweet loving woman. Then he does the song about the knife. Then he does the walk. He does the walk of life. Man, if he keeps doing the walk of life, then white's going to be in dire straits. Oh, snap. So queen g3 check is the threat. He checks him, comes back, and they always repeat. Both players have had enough. And after 7 hours of play and 93 moves, draw by reputation. Although they can agree to a draw, but they were repeating moves. So the game was always in balance. Nobody ever had a winning advantage. Maybe the engine will tell you white was better at some point. But neither side blundered after 7 hours and 93 moves of play. So a really well-played game. Nothing terrible from anybody. And a very fair draw. Unfortunately, players are still tied for last and haven't won a game. Tough break. Chess is difficult. I hope you enjoyed all the recaps from round 8. Hopefully we'll get live coverage to you tomorrow, 50-50. Either we will or we won't. And if we get better internet. Otherwise, you can still watch the recaps here on YouTube. Thanks for watching the recaps, everybody. I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold. Bye.